Welcome back, everybody. We're jumping right in today with, a lot to cover, really. President Trump starting off his second term with a whole bunch of executive orders.
Yeah, right out of the gate.
Immigration, energy, social policies, you name it. We've got a stack of sources here trying to get a handle on it all.
A lot to unpack, for sure.
I mean, these orders, they could really change things up. I mean, everyday life, right?
Yeah.
From what we see at the border to what our kids are learning in school, potentially.
Absolutely. And some of this stuff is, well, let's just say it's pretty interesting. Elon Musk's name is popping up, pardons for folks involved in the January 6th riot.
Yeah, I saw that. Okay, so where do we even begin? Let's maybe start with that whole America First idea. It was kind of the theme of his first term, right?
Exactly. And it seems to be the driving force behind a lot of these new orders as well.
Okay, so how does that play out, like in real terms?
Well, we're seeing it in the trade policies, for example. Remember those tariffs he imposed on imports from Canada and Mexico?
Oh, yeah, that was a big deal.
Well, those are likely to stay in place. And then there's the withdrawal from the Paris Climate Accord.
Right, that was a huge international agreement on climate change.
It was. But the administration argued that it was bad for American businesses and energy independence. So pulling out of it fits with that America First approach.
Okay, makes sense. But what about the border? That seems to be a big focus right out of the gate.
Absolutely. There's that national emergency declaration at the U.S.-Mexico border, for starters. Remember that?
Oh, yeah, I remember all that.
Well, that's all about freeing up money, essentially, to build the border wall.
Yeah, the wall.
Yeah.
Another big promise from his first campaign. Didn't quite get it done, huh?
Not entirely. So this is another attempt to, make good on that promise, although this move is almost certain to face legal challenges. We saw a ton of lawsuits over border wall funding during his first term.
And it sounds like those legal battles are just getting started.
Yeah, I'd say so, especially with that executive order to end birthright citizenship.
Oh, yeah. That one's making a lot of noise. Why is that such a huge deal, though?
Well, think about it. The 14th Amendment, the one that guarantees citizenship to anyone born on U.S. soil, that's what he's trying to change with an executive order.
Whoa, so he's going up against the Constitution.
That's what it looks like. Highly unusual, to say the least. A bunch of states, 18 to be exact, are already planning to sue.
Oh, wow. Sounds like this one could go all the way to the Supreme Court.
It wouldn't surprise me at all. The outcome of that case could literally redefine what it means to be an American citizen. It's a pretty big deal.
No kidding. It's like he's almost trying to provoke these legal fights, isn't it?
That's certainly one way to look at it. And it's not just the birthright citizenship order either. What about this new DOGE thing? The Department of Government Efficiency.
Yeah, what is that all about? And didn't I hear something about Elon Musk being involved?
Yeah, there are rumors swirling about that. The idea seems to be to streamline the government, make it more efficient, but the whole thing is pretty secretive.
Okay, but Elon Musk running the government? That's like something out of a movie.
Right. It does sound a little far-fetched. A lot of people are worried about this whole thing. They're calling it a shadow operation.
I mean, think about it. A billionaire, not elected by anyone, potentially having all this power, it is kind of unsettling.
Definitely raises a lot of questions. Who's really in charge? Who benefits? We'll have to keep an eye on that one.
So we've got border walls, birthright citizenship, and maybe Elon Musk running the show. What else have we got here?
Well, on the social policy side, there's this executive order that basically redefines gender. It says there are only 2 biological sexes.
Oh, yeah, I saw that one. What's the thinking there?
It's being seen as a rollback of protections for transgender individuals. A big step back, according to LGBTQ plus advocates.
And then there's that thing about ending all the federal diversity programs, right?
That's right. The diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, they're all gone. A lot of people are seeing this as a pretty clear signal about where the administration stands on these issues.
It does seem like a pretty big shift.
It is, and it's generating a ton of pushback. Advocacy groups, civil rights organizations. There's talk of legal challenges there, too.
This is a lot to digest.
Well,
And we haven't even gotten to those pardons for the folks involved in the January 6th riot.
yeah, about 1,500 people pardoned. Just like that.
Whoa.
Definitely adds another layer of complexity to an already pretty wild start to the second term.
It's interesting, though, isn't it? I mean, this is all pretty dramatic stuff. But it feels like the public reaction is, I don't know, kind of muted compared to Trump's first term.
It is interesting, yeah. Some people are saying it's just a case of desensitization. After 4 years of constant controversy, maybe people are just numb to it all.
Like, oh, it's just Trump being Trump, kind of.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Or it could just be that there's just so much happening all at once, it's hard to even keep up with it all, right?
I know I'm having trouble keeping it all straight.
Me too. And you can't ignore the fact that the media landscape has changed so much. Social media, the way we get our news, it's all different now.
So how do we make sense of it all? I mean, this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Well, that's what we're here for, right? To try and sort it all out. And we'll definitely be diving deeper into all of this in the next part of our deep dive.
Yeah, we've got a lot more to unpack, so stay tuned for part 2, where we'll dig into some of the potential legal battles brewing and what all of this means for, well, all of us, really.
So yeah, President Trump really hitting the ground running, but all these orders, they're going to be tied up in court for who knows how long. Like we were talking about, the birthright citizenship one, that's facing a mountain of lawsuits.
Yeah, it seems like everybody's jumping in on that one. States, civil rights groups, you name it.
And they've got a strong case, you know? They're saying it goes completely against the 14th Amendment.
Right, right.
And that's not just some legal fine print. That amendment, that's been the foundation of American citizenship for, what, over 100 years? Anyone born on U.S. soil, boom, you're a citizen. That's what's at stake here.
So what you're saying is if this thing actually goes through, someone born here in the U.S., they could be denied citizenship because of their parents, like if they're immigrants.
That's exactly what it means. Changes how we think about who belongs here, at a really basic level. I was talking to some legal experts, and they're saying this thing, it's probably going to end up in the Supreme Court.
Wow.
Yeah, huge implications.
It's kind of wild to think one executive order could potentially undo something so, I don't know, so fundamental to what it means to be American.
I know, right? And it's not just birthright citizenship that's got people riled up. DOGE, that Department of Government Efficiency, that's facing legal challenges too.
Right, right. People saying it wasn't set up properly, not transparent enough.
Exactly. And then you've got that whole Elon Musk thing. Some people are like, hey, he's a genius. Maybe he can fix the government. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, he's done some pretty amazing things in the tech world, no doubt. But I don't know, giving one person that much power, especially someone who wasn't elected, it feels a little risky.
Yeah, I get that. It's like, where do you draw the line?
Right. Like, today it's Elon Musk. Tomorrow, who knows?
Exactly. That's what people are worried about, Accountability. Who's DOGE going to serve? The public or some private interests? It's a good question.
It is a good question.
Yeah.
So, okay, we've got the legal challenges, the political stuff, but what about, everyday life? What are the real world impacts of these orders? We talked about transgender rights, the diversity programs, but is there anyone else we should be thinking about here?
Well, immigration, that's a big one. That national emergency declaration and then labeling some of those migrant groups as terrorists, that's going to change things in a big way for sure.
Yeah, I can see that. Probably create a lot of fear in those communities.
Definitely. And then what if that birthright citizenship order actually sticks? We're talking about future generations here.
Right.
Kids born here, but not citizens. Think about that. It could create a whole underclass, limited opportunities, a whole mess of social and economic problems.
Doesn't sound good. Sounds like we're at some kind of turning point. These orders, they're a big swing trying to change, well, everything it seems like, but it feels like there could be a lot of unintended consequences too.
I think that's right. Challenging the laws, social norms, everything. It's a big gamble for sure. Who knows how it's all going to shake out in the end?
Yeah, no kidding. Okay, before we get to some of the questions our listeners have sent in, I think it would be helpful to just, step back for a second and kind of summarize what we've talked about so far. Like, what are the big overarching themes you're seeing here?
Well, the America First thing, that's definitely front and center. We see it in the trade policies, immigration, energy.
Right, tariffs, the border wall, pulling out of the Paris Agreement.
Yeah.
It's all about putting American interests first, even if it ruffles some feathers internationally.
Right. And then there's this, this tendency to push the limits of executive power. That birthright citizenship order, that's a perfect example. As we were saying, that could have a huge impact on how we understand citizenship in this country.
And then you throw DOGE into the mix, all this secrecy, potential conflicts of interest. I mean, wow, it's been a pretty dramatic start to this second term.
Dramatic is one way to put it. And yeah, maybe the public isn't as vocal as they were before. But all these lawsuits, the political pushback, it's clear that these orders are going to be debated and fought over for a long time.
So what does all this mean for our listeners, just everyday people trying to figure out what's going on?
Well, it's hard to say for sure what the long-term effects will be, but the potential impact is huge. I mean, we could be talking about everything from the price of groceries to access to healthcare. Even things like educational opportunities and basic freedoms could be affected.
All right, so let's get to some of these listener questions, shall we?
Yeah.
We've got a lot of folks wondering about, the economic side of things, like could all of this actually backfire, hurt America's standing in the world, maybe even our wallets?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a possibility. Think about the tariffs, right? Those could easily escalate into full-blown trade wars. And that usually means higher prices for everyone, stock market volatility, all that fun stuff.
So like that Canadian maple syrup I'm so fond of, that could become a luxury item.
It's not impossible, no. And what about cars? A lot of those are made in Mexico, and with those new tariffs, well, buying a new car could get a whole lot more expensive.
Yikes. That's going to hurt. And what about the environment? Pulling out of that Paris Climate Accord, that can't be good, right?
Yeah, that was a big deal. The Paris Agreement, that was a global effort to, tackle climate change. Walking away from that, it sends a message like the U.S. isn't serious about this issue.
And that matters how?
Well, it could discourage investment in things like renewable energy, green technologies. And some countries, they're really prioritizing sustainability these days. They might not want to do business with a country that's not on board.
So it's not just about the planet. It's about, like, our place in the world, economically.
Exactly. And then there's the social and political stuff, right? It feels like all of this is just adding fuel to the fire in terms of, division.
Yeah, for sure. The transgender rights rollback, getting rid of those diversity programs, the immigration crackdown, it all feels very divisive, to say the least.
These are hot-button issues, no doubt. People feel very strongly about these things, and that's why the reactions are so intense. We have to remember, these aren't just abstract policies we're talking about. This stuff affects real people in real ways.
So where do we go from here? I mean, how do we even begin to make sense of all of this? It's easy to feel overwhelmed, like there's nothing we can do.
It's tough, I know. But I think it starts with staying informed, right? And talking to each other, even when we disagree. We need to listen to each other, try to understand where the other person is coming from.
That's good advice. But it's hard sometimes, to really listen, not just wait for your turn to talk.
I hear you. It's a skill, for sure. And we have to support the organizations that are fighting for, those who are being marginalized. Yeah. And hold our elected officials accountable. Whether it's voting, contacting our representatives, or even protesting, there are ways to make our voices heard.
Right, right. It's good to remember that we're not just, along for the ride. We can actually do something.
Exactly. These executive orders, they're a big deal, no question. But it's not the end of the story. The courts are going to have their say, Congress can push back, and in the end, it's the people who have the power,
Well said. Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, haven't we? I think a main takeaway here is stay informed, stay engaged, and don't forget that your voice matters. This is just the beginning of, well, who knows what. But we'll be here to help you make sense of it all. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.